spring dust rising from the plains of Macedonia, a small kingdom on the edge of the known world. Not the center of civilization, not the wealthiest, not the oldest, and yet, within a single lifetime it would overturn the ancient balance of power. This was not supposed to happen. Persia was eternal. Greece was divided. Macedonia was peripheral, but armies began to move. Roads filled with supply wagons, and the world that seemed permanent shifted, not because of miracle tactics, but because of choices, systems, and relentless discipline. This is the story of the Macedonian Wars of Alexander, the campaigns that did not just conquer empires, they changed what empires were. Welcome to the channel. Here, we explore turning points in history not as legends, but as processes. We look at how decisions, institutions, and strategies shaped outcomes, moments where the past could have gone differently but didn't. If you enjoy calm, serious documentary-style history, you are in the right place. At first glance, the Macedonian Wars are about conquest. A young king crosses into Asia and defeats an empire. But that is not the real story. This is not just about how Alexander won battles. It is about why no one stopped him, why the largest empire in the world failed to adapt fast enough, and why, after his march, the ancient world would never return to what it had been. The question is simple. How did a peripheral kingdom reshape civilization, and why was there no going back? Before the campaigns began, the world was a mosaic of power centers. To the east stood the Achaemenid Persian Empire, vast, wealthy, bureaucratic, a system held together by roads, governors, and tribute. The empire did not need to prove itself through constant total war. It existed through inertia. To the south, the Greek city-states, thinkers, sailors, rivals, brilliant, but divided by pride and memory. Athens, Sparta, Thebes, each locked into old grudges and regional interests. And then there was Macedonia, a land of hills and hard winters, less polished, less admired, but something new was forming there. Under King Philip II, Macedonia did not copy Greece. It reorganized the fundamentals of war. Infantry were drilled as a single living system, the Macedonian phalanx with long sarissa spears, moving as a wall. Cavalry became a decisive arm, not an afterthought. Officers were tied by loyalty, training, and shared campaigns. War was not seasonal. It was continuous, planned, funded. This mattered. Macedonia was not simply stronger. It was more organized. This is the environment Alexander inherited, not chaos, but momentum. And at the edge of Asia Minor, a question lingered. Would this new system confront the old Persian world or remain confined to Greece? The answer began with a decision. In 336 BCE, Philip II was assassinated. The moment seemed to threaten everything he had built. The expectation was fragmentation. A young successor, ambitious nobles, hostile cities. But instead of collapsing, the machinery of state tightened. Alexander secured the throne rapidly, not through impulse but through controlled force. Rebellions were not allowed to breathe. Allies were either reassured or removed. Then came the decisive choice. Rather than remain on the defensive, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia, a symbolic act stepping into Persian territory. The balance of initiative changed. This was not just invasion, it was a statement. The war would be fought on Persian soil, and from that point forward Persia was reacting. Popular imagination sees unstoppable advance, but at every stage, risk dominated. Alexander's army was smaller. Casualties could not simply be absorbed. Supply lines had to stretch across unfamiliar terrain. At the Granicus River, the Macedonian army faced its first major test. River crossing under enemy attack is one of the most dangerous operations in warfare. Retreat would weaken credibility. Recklessness would destroy the army. The choice was neither hesitation nor blind charge. It was calculated aggression, coordinated movement, disciplined formations, protection of leadership. At Issus, geography narrowed the battlefield. Persian numbers could not fully deploy. The Macedonian system, compact, drilled, coordinated, found its perfect terrain. At Gaugamela, the opposite happened. The field was wide, prepared for Persian chariots. This time the environment favored the empire again. The campaign did not turn on heroism. It turned on discipline-controlled pivots, exploitation of gaps, maintaining cohesion when others might scatter. Throughout the wars, the core conflict repeated, a vast imperial structure relying on tradition versus a newer military system designed for adaptability. Alexander did not simply attack cities, he attacked assumptions. That an old empire could not be displaced, that regions were fixed, that momentum belonged to the past. The victories were not accidents of charisma. They were consequences of logistics and organization. Macedonian supply trains were planned. Engineering units built bridges and siege works. Communication was direct, not lost through layers of bureaucracy. The army could march faster, concentrate force faster, and recover faster. Persian leadership, fragmented and regionally based, struggled to coordinate response across huge distances. Local satraps defended provinces, but unity at the decisive moment arrived late. When the Persian capital cities fell first, Susa, then Persepolis, it was not just occupation, it was psychological rupture. The empire that had seemed permanent now appeared replaceable. Subjects began negotiating with the new power rather than resisting for the old. Alexander did not merely win, he became the center of gravity. The campaigns continued eastward not just for conquest, but to stabilize control. Administrative systems were altered, local elites incorporated, urban foundations laid across Asia. Victory was not defined by single battles, but by something quieter, administration continuing to function under new leadership. And this is where the real transformation lies. The Macedonian Wars did not just end Persia, they changed the architecture of the ancient world. Trade routes linked the Mediterranean with Central Asia and India. Greek language became a medium of exchange across continents. Cities founded along the campaign routes became cultural anchors for centuries. Political imagination shifted. Before Alexander, empire meant ruling many peoples from a distance. After Alexander, empire meant spreading culture, administration, and military systems across huge spaces. The Hellenistic world emerged not Greek, not Eastern, but blended. Philosophy, science, and art traveled on the same roads armies once marched. Even Rome, rising in the West, still modest during Alexander's time, inherited this model. Its vision of empire, professional armies, and integrated provinces grew from Macedonian precedent. This was the long-term consequence. The map of possibility expanded. The Macedonian Wars did not just move borders, they redefined what borders were. In the end, the story of Alexander's campaigns is not about invincibility. It is about preparation, meeting opportunity, about systems built before the first battle was ever fought, about choices that seemed narrow in the moment and vast in their results. A small kingdom on the edge of the classical world changed the direction of history, not through myth, through method. And once those campaigns ended, the ancient world they left behind was not the same world they had entered. If you found this story compelling, tell me in the comments, which moment in ancient history should we explore next? If you'd like more calm cinematic history like this, consider subscribing and liking the video. It helps this channel bring more long-form storytelling to people who enjoy thinking about the past not as legend, but as living systems. Thank you for watching.